1821, the Inquisition in Portugal was finished. And in 1834, the religious orders were expelled from Portugal. So there was a movement, an anti-clerical movement that was very alive in Portugal during mainly the second half of the 19th century. There was also the English ultimatum and the pink map in 1891. That was, it was a complicated question, but it had to do with the colonies in Africa. But the really important thing is that Portugal was in a very fragile position comparing to the other European countries. In 1891, it was the first Republican attempt to overthrow the monarchy in Porto. And in 1908, it was a regicide. Our king was killed in Lisbon. And in 1910, starts the Republican regime. So this is for you to know how this period was of a very great transformations in social and political context. Okay. So specifically about it's not really about the homosexuality completely because it's not mentioned, but the first modern legislation that applies to homosexuality is the Penal Code of 1852. Unlike previous religiously inspired legislation, heavily contaminated by the power of the Inquisition, which characterized sodomy as a nefarious sin, this new legislation is inspired by Napoleonic Code, resulting from the French Revolution, in which there is no mention of sodomy or homosexuality. In other words, homosexuality is not decriminalized, but it is completely ignored. So it's not mentioned at all, which is good at the time. So as you can see, this is the text from the Penal Code. This is public outrage against modesty committed by action or the publicity resulting from the place or other circumstances with which the crime is accompanied, as long as there is no individual offense to anyone's honesty, shall be punished with imprisonment from 3 days to 1 year and a corresponding fine. I underline that bit, as long as there is no individual offense to anyone's honesty, because that is what one of those phrases in the legal text that opened to a lot of interpretation. So because of this segment, it was took place some imprisonments and that for people that were caught offending someone's honesty. So that was very subjective. So anyone could say that that particular scene could offend his sensibility. So this opened to a lot of different situations, as we will see. So some of the real sorry, just one thing about this. However, the same-sex relationships are punished under the legal concept of indecent exposure, which over time became prone to persecution under the successive regimes until it was officially decriminalized only in 1982. As Fernando Cascais says, the law merely formalizes social homophobia in legal terms, thus expressing a society's retaliation against a crime for which it cannot find other complainants or define other victims than its own offended sensibilities or moral conscience. So all based on that segment, the society could condemn who they wish, actually. So the real Lisbon characters. There are two characters that it is said to have inspired at least one of the novels that I'll be discussing. The first one is Marquês de Valada, José de Menezes e Távora, Rapaz de Silveira e Castro, and Alferes Marinho da Cruz. Marquês de Valada was caught by the police while having a sexual encounter with a soldier in a rented room in Travessa da Espera, Bairro Alto. He was fined and temporarily removed from his public post, but the soldier was arrested. It was a different treatment for one and other because of the social rank of each person. Marquês de Valada became the object of ferocious caricature in the Republican press and in the review theatre, which constructed the first visible image of the homosexual as a debauched aristocrat, a symbol of the rudeness of the monarchical regime and the cause of the country's decadence. Okay, so they kind of, I'll show you this. This is one of the articles that was published at the time. It was in a comic review journal that was Antonio Maria, and it's describing all the scenes about that encounter in the Travessa da Espera. So it was much talked about at the time, and the image of Marquês de Valada was very connected to this episode and to this situation. The other case was Marinho de Cruz, who murdered his lover, becomes the first case in which homosexuality, in addition to being a perversion, is seen as a disease. As the scholars of the sexual sciences determine it from then on. This was the beginning of the concept of acts of vice against nature that was later described in the Penal Code of 1912, already under the Republican regime. It should be noted that from this moment on, individualized segregation was underlined. We move on from the indecent exposure and the offended circumstances to a diagnosed differentiation of what is considered normal. So this was the first case in court to have the intervention of the doctor that said he was unimputable to be judged because he was sick. He had the disease. The homosexuality is considered for the first time a disease and not just a perversion. Okay. So the first work is Barão de Lavos from Abel Botelho. It was published. It was published in 1891, and it was part of a series that was entitled Social Pathology. The author was analyzing different social pathologies, and here he was analyzing homosexuality. He exposes and sheds light on social phenomena, and it is considered the first book in Portuguese literature that opens with themes previously unheard, like homosexuality and pedophilia. There are those who claim this work to be the first of homosexuality. It's a thing that is in discussion, but in fact, it's the first book that is published that concerns this subject. This was a scandal when it was published, of course. These were subjects that were taboo. However, at the same time, it had a great success of sell a lot of copies, and the church condemned it, but not completely, because this character, Barão de Lavos, he's an homosexual or a bisexual. You know, these terms at the time they were not clear, and he seduced a young man, Eugenio. Barão had 32 years old. The boy had 16 years old. He seduced and had a relationship with him, and had him in a room in Backwald, like a lover that he supported. But in the end, this character, Barão de Lavos, he's everything is discovered. His social society condemns it. He loses his wife. He loses his job. He gets sick. So it's kind of there's kind of a punishment for this behavior. It's very moral. So the church didn't like it, but at the same time, it did like it because there's a punishment in the end. The other work is Senhor Ganimede. It's very different. It's from 1906. And it's about a young man that it has taste to dress as a lady. He has many lovers. First, he seduces a very rich man that buys him gifts and has a great apartment for him, etc. But then he falls in love with another man and betrays that rich man. Well, that's a very complicated story. I'm not going to tell everything, but what I want to underline here is that in the end, no one gets punished. No one. Not the protagonist, that is Lionel. There is another woman that has a behavior that might be condemning. No one is. Everyone ends living happily ever after, which is which is curious at the time, that there is no moral punishment like in the other novel. Very quickly, this is the map of Lisbon. I don't have time for this. This is some of the locations that are in the novels. Senhor Ganimede, the theater. The theaters are very important places here because they are. Sorry. The presence of theaters in both novels is not at all by chance, since cross-dressing and reports of the existence of homosexuals, both men and women, were rather common in the theatrical world. There are also here Teatro Circo, Teatro da Trindade. This is the vision of Avenida da Liberdade at the time. And here is some of the places, as you can see, the places where the action goes in Lisbon. So it's almost around the Bairro Alto. The room where the sexual encounters occur in both novels are always in Bairro Alto. Bairro Alto was a place where you can find a room, a rented room, and be discreet about it. No one would talk about it. The life was all around Bairro Alto, Chiado, Freitas, Praça do Comércio, where they meet. Some places like Teatro São Carlos, Cervejaria Trindade was a very known coffee shop. And in Barão de Lage specifically, we can find a root of the places where you can find like some queer behavior. So it's very, you can draw in the map all the streets that he walks. They are described in the novel. So it's curious because Barão de Lage is the one that is already condemned by that behavior, but at the same time, the author, Abel, knows every place that you should go if you want to have homosexual sexual encounters. So he knows everything about it. So it's kind of suspicious how he condemns, and with a very moral ground, but at the same time he knows really well that it's a reality. So I think I don't have any more time. This is just some of the works that I consulted for this, and thank you.
To Rosa for giving me a wonderful context and grounds to share my own presentations. And while she was talking, I was seeing so many connections between our work. And I invite you also to spot where the topics and approaches are crossing themselves. Well, I am going to talk about a specific space for nightlife that is going to appear in Lisbon, roughly in the 1920s. Rosa has given most of the historical context, But during the First Republic, that is going to last between 1910 and 1926, when we have a military coup that is going to overthrow the Republic and start a military dictatorship, later on replaced by a national dictatorship, later on replaced by Estado Novo, the authoritarian dictatorship regime that is going to last until 1974. During this period, Portugal was taking part of the First World War, and the social, political, economic instability was way overboard in the country. But at the same time, there is a lot of cultural boost and a feeling of modernity and transgressive disruption that also goes hand in hand with this constantly speeding pace of the transformations that are striking not only the Lisbon, but are also, well, being felt all over the Western world, at least, or European, and even the United States, that are like the references for Portuguese Lisbon nightlife. I am going to approach these spaces, given the motto given by the conference topic, to reflect about how they relate, or what a relationship can be established between these clubs' representations, but also in many artistic, literary, and other forms of fictional representation often. But also how the fact that some of these representations feature queer characters will be hand in hand with the perception that is given by these specific spaces. Well, I'm going to begin with a map that kind of overlaps with the map that Rosa was presenting, because this specific kind of nightclubs that are self-entitled clubs or restaurant dancing or other commercial names, but they are often identified and compared to a cabaret who has like the Parisian model, but even the examples in Madrid to be established with, to be compared with. And these establishments are going to be located primarily in the downtown area. So in the area of Restauradores, also in the, in the Avenida da Liberdade, downtown Chiado. So actually it was the central area where you will find many other kind of coffees, restaurants, theaters, and like a circle of sociability places and entertaining venues that are going to be linked in the heart of Lisbon downtown. The specific spaces that I'm talking about will have, some of them gradually appear from the 1930 onwards. The peak is going to be in 1920. Then you have a lower decrease in the number due to many police interventions, due to the fact that these establishments are also known as casinos. So they offered a lot of gambling, which was illegal at the time. And they are going to peak again in 26 before gradually disappearing. The characteristics that differ these places from many others that are existing in Lisbon, and that often offer the same activities and even the same music, dances, etc., is and even gambling is described as an attractive trinity that is composed by the presence of women, the presence of dance and music, and the alcohol consumption or restaurant service. But unanimously considered also the main hidden attraction and reason of being of these places is gambling. And they work like fancy places for gambling for a specific part of the society. These are two images from two of these clubs, two very well-known famous clubs from this time. Maxims, which was placed at the palace in Restauradores, and Bristol Club, which was located in a common housing building that was refurbished and renovated and extended to house this very current, cosmopolitan, modern example of what could be done in Lisbon. And you can see that the placement or the scenario that is assembled in these two main halls. One you have the general view, and the other one you only have a detail, but both will present a dancing floor, a small stage for the jazz band to play, the tables gathering around the dance floor, and inviting to, well, partaking in conversation and flirting, drinking, having fun. Watching a small performance, many of these clubs will have like small, short, brief numbers of, well, music, but also dancing, some nude numbers even, or ventriloquists to give the other side of it, fado playing, gypsy bands, all kind of attractions that are going to take place here, and that work out as an invitation to have fun, to be entertained, to spend a few nights, a few good hours after the working time. And that is always the idea. When I'm playing here, and I started to play it before giving the context, just to shorten the time, is, well, an opportunity for you to see these faces with people inside. I often, when I saw these photos where you only see empty tables, get disappointed. And this Portuguese silent movie, which I'm showing you some excerpts, scenes from the movie here, was shot in Monumental Club, another club very close to Bristol. And this small part is actually something that is going to appear in contradiction with the young girl with the main leading role of this movie, heading to Fatima for a procession, a religious day, where another girl who is in a wheelchair is going to recover miraculous the ability of walking. And at the same time, in Lisbon, what you have is the male protagonist having this bohemian debauchery, orgiac moment, surrounded by these females, women who are not only labeled in this text as addiction and hysteria, unconsciousness, and all the sinful side, soul of jazz bands, all the sinful sides of what this club might represent. The same director had another film, which unfortunately was lost, that was shot in Maxims, and the title of that movie was The Devil in Lisbon. And in this movie, reportedly, the devil would incarnate as a woman and appear in Lisbon, where? In a club, in a nightclub, where she starts her whereabouts in the city. Well, this representation in cinema and also in literature often underline the transgressive aspects of these spaces. Because actually, I was telling you that other venues and other spaces will have the same practices, even the same people and the same activities. But these ones are different because they are linked with transgression. And this transgression is going to be or assume many different forms. Either it is legal for, as I was telling you, gambling, but also prostitution or use of drugs, but mainly moral transgression that is incorporated by the excessive nightlife style that may be pernicious for your health and your life, a lot of sexual promiscuity and what is addressed as deviation, heavy drinking, and other factors that are going to be associated with these spaces. So overall, when you address its representation in literature, illustrations, what you are seeing in my presentation are covers of ABC magazines illustrated by Jorge Barradas, who were advertising Bristol Club, and you get also to have a feeling of how this the image that is being conveyed about this specific time, this specific club. Well, overall, one can say that these representations will present clubs either as a place of modernity and cosmopolitanism, sorry, where actually the transgressive side is an evidence of this modernity and going against conventions, going against tradition, going against what is the past, so embracing the future, or as dance of debauchery, physical and moral, that are going to doom everyone who frequents these places to a life of misery, or even the third hypothesis, which is those places are desirable, they are necessary for a modern cosmopolitan city, but they do not exist in Lisbon. And there is this magazine article who is going to address exactly the non-existence of a place that should have met the expectations of what one could find at a club like this ones. They do not exist in Lisbon. However, what does exist in Lisbon are the characters, the people who frequent this place. And these people are eccentric, are against what is to be considered traditional and normal. And while for the men, you will find a lot of diversity, for women, and because this is a space for transgression, what you will find is a very specific type of women. And remember, having women there is essential to be to characterize this as a modern nightclub. So actually, these clubs are going to be attended by women who will not fit into the rule and will display a non-normative way of living and sexuality often, and even look. with a lot of androgynous features. Well, like Rosa, I also took two novels, and these are not at all queer novels. They are novels that are quite moral, both very moral, tales of transgression, repentance, and redemption by different ways that are mainly focused on these nightclubs in the 1920s Lisbon. What I'm going to briefly do is just to compare them. Well, they are both works from writers who are using a pen name. Although the first one, João Amial, is a much more conservative man who is going to align with the dictatorship, serve as a member of the National Assembly. He was a politician and a journalist and a writer. And his novel, The Noctivagans, Scenes from Lisbon Life, focus on this guy, Gabriel, who is a painter, who becomes obsessed with a mysterious woman and dives into the madness of nightlife and like gets completely lost in all the debauchery, physical and moral, that the night has to give, and only achieves redemption by heading to the countryside and being healed physically and spiritually by the benefits of being away from that madness. Report-de-CIES, ex-reporter, was the pen name of Reinaldo Freire. Reinaldo Freire is a much more controversial guy, and his memoirs address his addiction past. He's also known for fictionalizing a lot his news and journalism articles. This one, the novel is entitled The Virgin of Bristol Club. And the main character is a woman, an orphan, who is trying to escape to her guardian, a powerful man. And she loses her job as a theater chorus girl, and she starts working at Bristol Club, one of the nightclubs, and she keeps her virtue. That's why she's the virgin of the Bristol Club. She's not selling herself. She's like working and getting rich and taking advantage of a man. But ultimately, to help another friend, she is going to sell her virginity and lose completely her virtue until she achieves redemption by committing suicide. Well, both these novels have queer characters. They are not, well, in the first case, it's more openly addressed as an homosexual character. But in the second case, what you have is some evidences that support the queerness of the characters. And what is interesting is that in the first case, this character is like seen as despicable. He is futile, he's needy, he's clingy. He's actually a very unpleasant character. While in the second case, what you have is a very rational man who is well-read, didn't often travel, but he is like the voice of reason in the novel. Well, the fact is that from 1927 onwards, the existence of these clubs is going to find an end. They are going to be replaced by other places. And what I wanted to establish here is this connection between how the clubs are being represented and the coincidence, even if still from a moral view of the queerness of the characters, is going to mirror this acceptance or rejection of this lifestyle. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I will add Filipe Couto Gomes as a co-author also. He will have the chance to present himself later. And yeah, thank you very much for having me, for accepting also our paper here. This was a collaborative work and it was like an independent research, some curiosity that we had to kind of make visible the history of queer nights in Lisbon, that it was quite invisible. I was not in touch with your reflection today. Wow, I love both your presentations were amazing. Thank you. Yeah, this idea of doing kind of socio-historical review came from, first of all, from archival research I was doing at the time to kind of identify the histories of women who use drugs in Portugal, because, I'm coming from the drug field. I think with the lens of anti-prohibitionist agendas. So I was very interested in connecting sexism and prohibitionism and to uncover the histories and experiences and alternative femininities related with youth experiences. So yeah, in this archive, I began, identifying some pieces and, some pieces of information. And then again, with my colleagues, Manuel, Filipe, also Jordi, I think we had this panel that was in the conference, another conference that was celebrating the 20 years of the decriminalization of homosexuality in Portugal. So we planned something about also related with drug use, because sometimes drug use, when talking about homosexuality and these topics, is not a very welcome area, let's say. So yeah, we tried to bring another piece to the puzzle of uncovering the queer histories, the history of queerness in Portugal, and the history of nightlife also. So yeah, my presentation is not super pretty, I'm sorry. Well, it's here. But well, we all know that nightlife, and the previous session was very interesting, also revealing it, that nightlife actually had relevant, and the darkness of the night had a relevant, treated an environment, relevant space for queer experimentation, and to the production of subcultural practices, experience of gender sexual performances alternative to the binary and normative society. So these were also sites to begin, the political agendas and the advocacy movements related with nightlife. In our case, this is very well documented, for example, in the US, in the UK, and we were very interested also in doing the same in Portugal. So yeah, we begin a kind of archive research. We were also on the amazing ABT, and oh, it's amazing to know that reading. And we soon discovered that we didn't really had a lot of information. We had some information in the literary, in the books, but not a lot of information. And then, yeah, we had this idea of doing this history from the last 100 years with information we actually had, and to try to create a pattern or analyzing what happened. So we begin with the analysis of the Roaring 20s in Lisbon that Cecilia just presented. Then the beginning of the authoritarian periods on, like the Portuguese dictatorship. Then, of course, from the implementation of democracy until the early 2000s and until now, more or less. And we were, searching through several sources, including your book, actually. I will not repeat what my colleagues just said, but yeah, the 20s were a very modernistic time, and also time for some kind of exploration, and also for bringing up or for some queer intellectuals begin also expressing themselves in the book. So we had Antonio Boto, for example, we had this part of a poem from 2022. He writes he was actually a homosexual person, and some theorists say that he did the first come out on poetry. So it was a relevant person to include in our analysis, and he actually wrote, "If daylight covers us with shame, let us wait for the night locked in a kiss," revealing also how the darkness of the night would give a place, and there was also this discussion, about the visibility and invisibility in the previous panel, and I think this is interesting because invisibility, at least in this time, was interesting for exploring and existing and expressing. Then, of course, nightclubs also offered a ground for queer experimentation because of this modernity, but also the tension with the tradition and the moral voices always, criticizing. So there was this cultural tension around the nightclubs that Cecilia just said. But at the same time, there was this description of these queer characters, people that were kind of participating in the nightclubs and reinforcing the glamorization, the cosmopolitan character, the modernity of the Lisbon to come, let's say. There were also in the roaring 20s, we also contacted with modern drugs. For example, reporter X, Reinaldo, had a very nice part in his book, in Memories of Ex-Morphinoman, where he says, until the First World War, the only drug we had for, to give us emotion was alcohol. And now suddenly we have cocaine and we have morphine and we can, explore with new stimulants and depressants and with these psychoactive experiences. And this brought, a new ash or a new tension, a new thing for this experimentation at one hand, and also for the moral tensions between the modernity and the tradition. And here, of course, we try to make visible also Judith Teixeira, that was a Portuguese poetess. The first one, to our knowledge, that wrote lesbian poetry. And she was very humiliated. She, Antonio Boto, the one I told before, and Roque, that wrote about more erotic poetry, they were very publicly humiliated in a very violent way because of the transgressive character of their writings. And actually the other two, because they were men, they survived to history, and Judith was completely forgotten for decades. And now she's being made visible again. And connecting with our topic, we were not sure. We knew that she was a Wayne woman, a woman from the public sphere that was participating and trying to get a place there. But at the same time, and she had these references to sexual, sexuality, and also she even uses these orgies of morphine. We don't know if she used it. We don't have any reference to pointing it out, but the topic was on her poetry, revealing that these were relevant on that time. So these people, I need to that. Sorry, but the use of drugs, the club culture, and the queerness after dark were something that was used by the traditional voices and the moral voices, the very conservative voices, to justify, the silencing and also the social degradation and social penalization of people. And of course, the nightclubs were closed. We had the laws that we implemented drug prohibitionism in Portugal from the 20. Actually, in 9th December this year, we had the 100 years of drug prohibitionism in Portugal. With all its very good implications for human rights and whatever. And yeah, this, that there was this double, this process of othering the queer people who were using drugs and in nightclubs, in the process of really very brusque and violent social degradation process. That then was institutionalized in our dictatorship, where homosexual people were considered vagrants, so they experienced a lot of police brutality. There was this class association because the poor men were the ones who were mainly persecuted and punished. And yeah, they had in one hand the police brutality, on the other hand, like the kind of moral regeneration from a super violent psychiatric practices. And in this very difficult context, they had to find their places of being, of meeting up, of creating connections. So yeah, during these parties, the beaches, parks, bars, private parties, and public toilets, stigmatized bars and coffees, had a role in creating a space, safer spaces for these people. And during the 60s, the first semi-clandestine gay bar opened in Lisbon, I think so. Bar Z, and then Brica Brac in Príncipe Real, that actually became, the gay district in Lisbon. Then after the end of dictatorship, we had a part very, just after the Carnation Revolution, we have a flourishing drag scene. It seemed that they emerged as the cry for freedom and sexual liberation. So it was very glamorous to go to a drag show. It was inserted in the culture. And then, other clubs began to open, for example, Trumps, that was a vital token of the gay nightlife, and Fragile in Bairro Alto, that was not, a gay bar, but it was gay friendly, or, like queer welcoming, let's say. And it was interesting. There were also some reports of the use of drugs as technologies of the self to experiment with sexuality, with body performances, social performances, and so on, and also around these contexts. And here we have António Variações. He was a queer person, a very interesting singer. I really loved him forever. And yeah, it was kind of a token of this moment of queer renaissance in Lisbon. And he was also a token of the beginning of the AIDS darkness in Lisbon, okay? Because he allegedly died from this virus and began, a very strong and very cruel process of repathologication, sorry. And social degradation and so on of the queer people again. With strong impact, and in Portugal actually, because sometimes things happen later here, our country is quite conservative, so we need more time sometimes to do or to begin some social movements. And in Portugal, the LGBTQ movements, advocacy movements began with HIV advocacy movements. Okay, so the HIV is on the contrary to the other countries. And yeah, it was actually, I think this is one reference from you, Philippe, that actually 1 year after the new highly effective antiretroviral therapy became available, we had, Lisbon had its first queer-focused public event, so okay, the queer renaissance. We have here some indication that it's okay, there probably will be more a place for queerness after the AIDS darkness. And yeah, we enter in our new century, and with our new century, we have technology and the way it shapes and impacts the queer socialization, the impact of apps on the dating processes, on, also the well-being and social and body pressures on the queer bodies. Also the way they reproduce, like inequalities and rejection dynamics. And we also had because until the beginning of the century, it was always about the homosexuals and then the travestites, but all of them were seen as homosexuals, and then, with the very tragic murder of Gisberto Salles Jr., a Brazilian trans woman, homeless living in Porto, that was completely brutalized. The trans rights began also to be claimed and reclaimed in the streets. So in this century, we had, we increased the vocabulary on one hand. We had the impact of the technology revolution on queer sociabilities and communities and dating. We imported also nightlife trends like the dark room culture and other dynamics, more connected with sex positivity and in some cases drug positivity also. We also had the impact of the very violent touristification and gentrification processes in Lisbon. Constantly Pires talk about gayification of Príncipe Real, creating specific routes of, gay spaces, let's say gay-friendly spaces for tourists, oriented for tourists. And this is having a strong impact on the queer underground culture in Lisbon, because actually they don't have a space in center anymore. It's impossible to rent, it's completely impossible. So the center, as you show in your maps, the center were very, the place for queerness in Lisbon, and now they have to go to the outskirts of the city to continue their subcultural production. Also to raise the labor exploitation and precariousness of nightlife, because several queer people work in nightlife, because it's informal and it's, the precarity is something also to highlight here. And the future of queer nightlife in Portugal remains to be written, and I can finalize with this. That is a map from the queer spaces in the last 20th century, in the last 100 years. And the last one is the Planeta Manas, a place, a queer-led place doing very interesting, by the way, queer raves. And as you see, they are super in the periphery of the city, all the history was told and in the center. Now they have to begin a new history outside the city, and I finalize here. Thank you very much.